How long are we going to continue to chase a future that doesn't exist when it comes to ourselves? I think that many times when referencing the future, we lose a lot of our ability to navigate our present because we think our present self doesn't have the capabilities that we will have in the future. But the same future that we're dreaming of is the same dream that we'll be present for. I think it's important to recognize that there is no future self to achieve. Everything that you can be, everything that you will be is always in the now. And I say that not to say, don't focus on the future, don't be goal oriented, but to recognize when it comes to our development as people, and especially with the change that we wish to undergo, we shouldn't put it off into some version of ourselves that doesn't exist. We should continue to allow it to be instilled into our present possibility. And I don't know, my own experience with that, I think when we recognize what we need in the present, that's the moment we actually begin to start doing the things we need to do presently. And once we start doing the things we need to do presently, we actually experience change in the present. Because change, I feel like, is always a present thing. And the whole idea that change takes a lot of time, or we have to wait till the future to where change is sort of nonsense in a way. Because we don't change depending on the day. It's not like we wake up and then all of a sudden we're different. Change has always been a very gradual and present thing. And sometimes it happens without our knowing because we aren't present enough to see the ways in which we are changing. That said, I'm not necessarily saying we need to watch our change, but I am saying we need to be present enough to actually take part in it. I think when we live our change through a present standpoint, or at least live our life through a present standpoint, we don't really need to rely on the future assumptions and expectations to do anything. And I think in a lot of ways, our expectations take away our freedom, because the more we expect to be a certain way depending on a certain day, the more likely we are to negatively impact ourselves in reference to it. Or I'm not where I need to be and I need to be changed by this day. I think that never really mattered. I think that never really was a thing that we needed to establish within ourselves. I understand the premise of having motivation in order for our change, but the motivation should be present. It should be us wanting to change the way we feel right now, or at least us changing the way in which we think so we can change the way in which we feel on a regular basis. I think that's all change really is. It's changing our thoughts and aligning our actions to how we want to feel. And I made a video a couple of days ago called Feeling is a Secret. It is in reference to Neville Goddard's idea, but I think it really is about our present potential and our ability to give to ourselves what we need in the present in order to not necessarily be in reference to the past or the future. There is no past self to overcome and there is no future self to achieve. That's not to say that the past and future aren't good reference points, maybe for our own understanding, but to say if we truly want to understand who we are in our expression, then it's important to be present, because who we are is more easily expressed than it is thought, and past and future only exist in our mind. Truly. When we actually learn to embrace the present, we recognize that a lot of the abstractions we make, a lot of the separation that we make in our mind really doesn't add to anything. It really just takes away from our current experience and our ability to understand ourselves and see ourselves for who we are, where we are. And the only objective is to do what you can with what you have and where you are. And if we're not doing that, then we're not really doing anything. We're just waiting on opportunities to do the things that we already want to do presently. And I know sometimes it's difficult. I myself procrastinate and when it comes to development and some things that I want to do for myself, sometimes I do put it on the back burner. And that's why I can sort of say this with a lot of certainty, that we don't really gain anything from doing that. I think sometimes we're waiting on certain feelings to be aligned. We're waiting on ourselves to be different, when we can establish that differentness as long as we're present enough to do so, as long as we give ourselves the real opportunity to do so. And what I mean by that is recognizing that, say, for example, I feel doubtful about some type of change I want to undergo. Say I feel doubtful about my ability to, present something. The objective wouldn't be to just think about my doubt. It would be to be present enough to recognize that presentation presentation is really just speaking. And speaking is something we do all the time. Like, it's about giving yourself a present opportunity to at least have a say in what you're doing. I think when we don't allow ourselves to sort of give ourselves new perspective or to look at things in a different light, then all we are is in relation to everything that we see. We don't recognize how much potential we have in just imagining circumstances in a different way and just giving ourselves a little bit more grace when it comes to the life that we live, and recognizing that we can't predict everything. We can barely predict anything. No one knows what's going to happen in the next 15 seconds. It could be a lot different than what you expect. And that's not to say we have to be fearful of what may come, but to say we at least have to be present enough to see it when it does. I think that's one of the most important things. And I think that also aligns with parts of yourself. Because if who we are is more easily expressed than it is thought, then we have to give ourselves a chance to be expressed and give ourselves a real chance to allow ourselves to be expressed so we actually can observe whatever it is we want to. I think sometimes when we get in our head that our expression is so cyclic, or we learn to navigate the world with our minds, we tend to not actually give ourselves a real chance at being free within ourselves, at being free within our expression, being free within our ideas. And we tend to fall victim to ideas that once plagued us in the past and don't necessarily align with what we actually want for ourselves. And I think there is so much beauty and potential and love that you can sort of experience in giving yourself the present moment back and not living in reference to the future and not living in reference to something that doesn't exist currently. You know, when we create these certain dichotomies between us and the future, certain separations, we sort of establish this idea that what we are currently is not sufficient enough to complete those certain tasks. The problem with procrastination, this is something my freshman year English teachers told me. The problem with procrastination is that we think our future self is going to be more fit, more willing to do the things that we don't want to do now. And I think that's never really the case. Currently, I'm in university, in college. And there have been plenty of times where I procrastinated, and then I get to that time where I said I was going to do something, or felt like I would be ready and able, and the feeling's the exact same. And the feeling's the exact same because I'm still in the present, and I haven't really done anything to shift my perspective or understanding of it. And whenever we don't do anything to allow our perspectives to shift, they don't. We can become stagnant, we can become static as we allow, and we can become free, and we can become ever-changing as we allow as well. I think these two have to exist in sort of conjunction in order for either of them to. Meaning that we're either giving attention to our stagnation or our change. We're either investing or we're just holding on to our money for no reason. You know, I think it is important to sort of invest presently, not necessarily invest into the future, because the only way to build the future is to be present. The future starts now. We're constantly etching into the future that we're quote unquote going into. And if that's the case, then it's important to start currently establishing the things that we want to be present within this quote unquote future for ourselves. If there is a future version of ourselves we want to achieve, it's not about just waiting to that future. It's not about just thinking about that future. It's about doing things presently until you feel like you would in that scenario, in that state. And the thing about feeling is we can always give ourselves feeling. Feelings can be decided by you. And I don't know, I feel a lot more liberty in saying stuff like that because everything really is subject to our own perspective. And that doesn't necessarily mean there aren't negative things in the world that would cause anybody to feel a certain way. But to say at the very least, everything that we feel is always in relation to how we feel about ourselves, and how we feel about ourselves in proportion to many of the things that we have attached ourselves to. And I'm not saying we need to detach ourselves from anything. I'm saying at least we have to be present enough to recognize that some of our feelings can be under our own jurisdiction. Like times where we feel like procrastinating, times where we don't feel like necessarily working on our change. We still can work on our change. We can think about how it would feel to be changed in this way and change our entire vibrational and energetic state into actually moving into that change. And I try to do this with myself often, and truly it feels so liberating to not sort of be victim or not sort of be swayed and pulled by your emotions constantly. Not saying emotions aren't a beautiful thing. I think emotions are beautiful, but I think emotions are there to be felt, to be understood, to recognize why you felt certain ways about certain things and sort of get an opportunity to see yourself, because emotions are an expression, all emotions, doubt, joy, everything. And sometimes I think we really have to sit down with ourselves and think about what it is we want to feel. How do I want to feel about myself? How do I want to feel as I conduct my day? How do I want to feel as I live my life? And a lot of us want to say stuff like happy and joyful and cheerful and grateful. All of those are things that can be influenced by our thought. And the thing about thought is we can think anything we want so long as we're present enough to do so. I don't think people recognize how much of a cheat code presence really is to our own change. Because the second we recognize we want something presently is the second we can begin to give it to ourselves. What the world doesn't give to you, you must give to yourself. And I'm recognizing what the world doesn't give to you is not necessarily always in reference to what you see. Because what you see is always in reference to how you feel. You know, for example, say I was some person who never even knew what a trophy was, and say I was handed a trophy. It wouldn't really mean anything. Same thing with any accolades, a diploma, some type of certificate. It wouldn't mean anything. It truly wouldn't. I wouldn't be able to get any happiness from it because I didn't understand the values that I was supposed to be placing on the certain things in order to make me valuable. And I say that not to say that those things aren't valuable, because I live in the society which deems it as such, but to say that there are potentials out there for us to be valued based on things that we haven't even thought of, to be valued on accord of us just being alive, to be appreciative of us just being alive and appreciative of our present power, to change the ways in which we live. And in looking at life from that way, we recognize that we've never had to think in proportion to what everyone else does. We've always had a subtle freedom in order to think for ourselves. And I think it's just about consciously exercising it. Recognizing when we're taken away from ourselves and sort of feeling negative about ourselves. And thinking about why, first and foremost. Of course, if it's grounded in our actions, of course, it makes sense. But we have to understand why we even made those actions in the first place and understand what is being shown of our character that can actually be changed presently. And in that way, we actually get a chance to overcome both the feelings and the versions of ourselves that were present. I think sometimes the problem with change and the sort of feeling we have associated with it is so negative because we think who we are is sort of a stagnant thing. Because we think part of ourselves is stagnant. But I think if we are ever changing, then nothing really holds on to us. And I think being in the present is being part of the unknown that is you. And in that way, you sort of are able to shed the weight of many of the labels you've placed on yourself in terms of negative things. And I think that's sort of the most beautiful thing about the present too. Is being able to choose and decide who you are readily and presently. Because who we are is constantly a choice and decision that we make. You're constantly choosing to be the way you are. It may not seem like an active choice, but it's just a result of all the choices that you've made in the past. And if we are present enough, we can begin to make new choices. Like, you could be impatient one day. I always use patience. We could be impatient one day and make the choice to be patient now. And all of a sudden, we are patient. As long as we don't allow ourselves to constantly live in reference to the past, we're new. Because we're always establishing something new. We're always in a new moment, and we're always new with the moment so long as we're present enough to be within it. Because us and the moment are one. There's no moment void of you. Because a moment is something that must be perceived. And a moment is sort of in reference to time. So I think that's something that we've constructed too. Because everything is just one long now. The time is now. The time is always now. Both to start and to finish. I think it's just about recognizing that you don't have to postpone yourself when it comes to your feelings and appreciations for yourself. And gratitudes you may have when it comes to your change, and maybe aspirations when it comes to your change and development. Anything that we want to do can always be done presently in a way, not necessarily in reference to all the opportunities that must be given by others, but at least in terms of the feelings that we need in order to actually take the steps to lead to our goals and desires. All that to say, thank you very much. Appreciate each and every one of you, and I hope we're sort of being present in our undertaking of our future self. I think that's a sort of majestic thing, a pontifical thing, a profound thing that we can give to ourselves, is recognizing that there is no future self to achieve. There's no thing that we need to run to, just something that we must be. So keep being y'all, keep being great. Make sure you're taking care of yourself, doing what you can, which you have a lot on the way, a lot already here. Keep being y'all, keep being great. Ebook, audiobook on the way. Hardcover and paperback, been here. ProfoundPioneer.com. Check them out, guys. Check them out.